Welcome into our latest Hear Me, See Me podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Bruner. Hear Me, See Me is a year-long initiative from WIBW TV where we take a look at mental health, raising awareness and exploring some of the issues surrounding mental health in our communities and our state and our nation. We're going to focus on older Americans, and it is a huge issue. Connie Michaelis is my guest, and the reason it becomes a growing issue is because our population in the U.S. of people over the age of 65 is growing. We're expected to have, what, a 45% increase by 2050. So
Absolutely.
There are a lot of folks getting older.
That's right, and that's what we want, right? Is to get older.
It's better than the alternative.
Some people are not privileged
exactly.
to get old, so that's what we want.
And Connie, you have worked with older adults. You've made your career. You worked at a local retirement village, retirement community. I hate to call them nursing homes, right?
No,
because it's so much more than that these days.
Exactly.
And you have written a book on sharing your advice for healthy aging. May I ask your age?
My age is 76.
76 years young.
Yes. And I'm very proud of it. And when we see those ads and things where people say, and it's a secret, I go, you know, who are we fooling? We ought to be celebrating age every day. Absolutely. What are the challenges, though, when it comes to aging? Because when we speak mental health, we all have brains, we all have mind. We all have mental health to worry about and to be concerned about. But I imagine through the course of your career, you must have learned some unique challenges that confront us as we get older that can impact our mental health. Yeah. Well, I'm always really careful to say that I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a social worker, but I have met and worked with thousands. I think I estimated one day 5,000 to 6,000 individual seniors and their families over different issues. And I always say I've seen the good, bad, and the ugly. And sometimes I'm inspired by those who are not doing it well in my own life to decide how I want to age in a healthy, successful way. And I think one of the biggest problems we have as we age is getting stuck. And by that I mean change is hard.
Right.
And but as we get older, we have to face lots of it. And we may not be prepared to do that mentally. And so we stay where we are, do what we've been doing, and it's not working anymore. And things like loneliness and depression, isolation, are things that will happen if you're not making active choices to change that and to do something about it. Because as you get older, your friends are passing, you have more health issues, that's a given. And so the problems are there. We have to have an attitude of change and embracing what's happening and that transition it takes to move on. And we have to have a will to do it and an attitude to do it.
Let's talk about some of the changes first of all, because you say there are choices, but not some of the changes that we will encounter as we get older aren't necessarily a choice. For one, I think about work. Most people will eventually retire from their profession, and that can be tough. I sometimes think even as I've gone throughout my career, I thought, well, gosh, if I'm not doing this, what else am I going to do? Well, suddenly you're at an age where you retire. Sometimes it's by choice. Sometimes it's you just have to retire. And suddenly there's not a place to wake up and go to in the morning.
Well, one of the big issues is preparing for that. You know, I just think a big issue with aging is getting your head out of the sand and thinking of the future and what are we going to do, and how my husband is in the midst of that right now. He's retiring at 78. So that he's worked a long time, but right now he's contemplating, okay, what am I going to do? Where am I going to get involved? I do have to have a reason to get up in the morning. And so I think in general that's a universal thing, but we can plan and we can think about what are we going to do. And there's all kinds of opportunities to keep on working, but working at something you're passionate about or interested in. And we know there's a need for a lot of volunteers. And so there are choices. You may not have the choice to retire, but there are choices after you do. Okay, what am I going to do with my life? Keep
on planning. Plan that out. Plan that out. Have you ever retired?
Well, in what I do, I don't really have to. And I do think, I believe them because I keep writing things and I keep speaking to them. I keep my brain going and I keep my life active, and that's my plan. It really is.
I was going to say, that was your choice. You don't necessarily have an employer that you go to every day for a set number of hours, but your choice was, how am I going to fill those hours? And is that really where a lot of the writing came from?
Absolutely. I just keep doing it. And you know, I'm always preaching to myself. So when I talk about have a good attitude, I better have one. So yeah, it's self-preservation really for me, is to keep on writing, and that keeps me studying, that keeps me learning, you know, it keeps me reading, and it keeps me engaged with people like you, which is fun. So yeah, that's my plan.
Absolutely. I understand that. I understand that. You mentioned loneliness and isolation. To me, I think that would be the biggest thing once you stop. Because part of the workplace is, and we had done one of our reporters did a story regarding how more workplaces are developing mental health programs and focusing on that for their employees. And a local CEO had said at one point that when there's talk about should we let everybody remote work, and our boss here has even said, you know, you spend more time with the people that you work with, waking hours, probably than your own family, because most of the time you're at home. And so that was his point, the CEO's point, with why he really didn't favor remote work. People need contact, and the workplace is where you get it. And so that's why he feels it's important for his employees to come to work every day, to have some of that interaction. How do you replace that interaction when you age? Because again, that's where retirement, that's going to be a huge change and adjustment. I don't have people to go and talk to every day.
Well, there's an important theme that I embrace, and it's right time, right place. And as we age, at what time in our lives do we make sure that we have the social engagement that we need and want? Need, emphasis on need. And so if you're living in a 5-bedroom home and you no longer have any children at home, and you're occupying a large space in a neighborhood where maybe everybody's going to work every day, and maybe you're just alone in that place, maybe it's time to think of a neighborhood where maybe more of your peers would live. Now, it could be a senior community, it could be, but it could be any kind of neighborhood where there's social activity and engagement for a group of people. And we see that in 55-plus communities. You see it springing up everywhere because it's a need. But being in the right place at an age, older age, gives you the opportunity to stay active and stay involved. And you have to seriously consider in your life, are you in the right place? Is this the right time for me to be in the place I am? And I think that kind of planning, again, goes a long way, especially if you're a solo ager, which means widow, widower, or just a single person. There are a lot of people that don't have large families or any children. Now, they especially need to plan about where they're going to be so that they have the socialization that everyone needs. You're lucky if you have a big family and they see you all the time and you live next door, but that's not very common anymore. The kids live in California, right? So right place, right time is a theme that I think helps us address where we are in our lives.
How did you see that concept of place evolve over the course of your career? You know, like you say, we don't use the term nursing home anymore because it's so much beyond that. But how did you see that evolve?
Well, I think originally, when we think of the history of nursing homes, it was a healthcare system. That's why they look like hospitals, is because they were developed from hospitals. And so the growth of that to now a place to go, retire, and have fun with your peers. And, you know, happy hours and social engagements and, you know, Margaritaville. I met many young kids, adult children of the seniors who said, well, when can I move in? Because of all the activity and the hobbies and the exercise classes right at your fingertips. Well, that is the way of the future. No more nursing homes or old folks' homes. They're places where people choose to go and have chapters of their life that are still active, engaged, having fun. And honestly, we know that at some time we may need health care But if you live in a place where that's available, that makes it nice. And I know there's lots of home health agencies. All of these trends are to allow people to stay active and either in their own home or a home of choice. You know, when we talk about aging in place, well, what place? Okay, that 5-bedroom home you raised your family in? Maybe not. Maybe someplace smaller, maybe someplace more convenient. So I think we'll see all those trends continue to grow. These baby boomers, millions of us, are not going to go for the old nursing home idea.
Right.
Not.
And that's why this becomes an issue. We'll get back to the healthcare thing and,
Yes.
and how that plays in
Yes.
as well. But that's why this is such a big issue and
Right.
why I wanted you to come on and talk those numbers that I mentioned about how we are an aging population. And so how do we make sure that the mental health is addressed? Because what happens, what have you seen happen when people don't make the choices, don't do the planning, and then they find themselves in that place of loneliness and isolation? How large of a problem is that?
It is a big problem. If TV is your best friend in your life and you're at home alone, wherever that home is, alone, and you're isolated from outside influences, then you can easily slip into a depression. You don't really know whether it's night or day. You're not taking your medications correctly. And there's so much fallout from loneliness. It's amazing. The increase in dementia is estimated to be 68% for those who are alone, isolated, and in a situation where there's no stimulation of other people. A 68% greater chance of falling into a dementia state or Alzheimer's. That's a health problem in the United States, and then all those people have to be cared for. So it's a medical issue in our country, like the Surgeon General said. We need to find a cure for this, cures for it, so that we don't see that slide into depression.
And when you talk about the slide into depression and loneliness and isolation as well, and why this not just a not physical health issue, but when you look at the numbers of the statistics when it comes to suicide, there are surprising numbers. We tend to think of it as an issue among our teenagers and making our young people feel supported and heard, and that absolutely is true. But older adults make up a large segment of the demographic that dies by suicide.
Absolutely. And you know, I have the habit of reading obituaries, and I think about that because it wouldn't be well known, like the death of a 18-year-old kid. And sad but true. And I think that that's another issue. But when someone feels that lonely and that isolated, they're thinking, well, what are my choices? Well, honestly, that's one that comes to their mind, sadly to say. So I do think all of these issues are important. Everyone needs someone to see them and hear them.
Yes.
And whether it's neighbors doing that for each other, of course families. But when families live thousands of miles away, a phone call is not quite the same. But I've seen that. Now, working in a community as I did for all those years and still involved in community life through other businesses, I see that as one answer, a big answer. But the problem is the expense of it and, well, mainly that's it.
Right. It is hard when people see a bill like that and then they're like, do I really want to go that route? But there are other things outside of that. So what can all of us as a society do to become friendlier and more welcoming and engaging to our older friends and neighbors?
It's just so important. There's nothing really more fun than sitting down with a 90-year-old and having a conversation about their history. It's fascinating. And so intergenerational activities are great. Our culture in general is just not friendly to growing old. And other parts of the world, you gain more status the older you get. Someone's kissing your ring, so to speak. And I think, well, how would you feel if you were growing old in that kind of culture where you were admired and respected because you were an elder? You might be happier and have a better mental attitude to begin with. But our culture, historically, the Western cultures are not that way. We kind of move people to the side, old people to the side. It's all about being younger and vibrant and active. And so I think it's our responsibility. And really, it's a job of pure pleasure once you get into it, is to meet and greet and meet people that are elders, you know, spend time with them. And that can happen so easily if you open your eyes. They're everywhere, you know. And like I said, we have this reputation of grumpy old people, you know, and sometimes it's true. Right. So I just think it's important that that people in general keep that in their minds and be sensitive to their older neighbors. Go check on them, you know. It's easier than we think it is. It's a problem that can be solved by human beings, by people. It doesn't take an act of government, and our governments are trying to do something about it, and I'm glad. But it just takes being neighborly. You know, that's what it takes.
That's the first step, exactly. Just say hello, give a smile.
Yeah.
Bring the extra slice of cake across the street. That's good enough.
You make a big pot of soup, take a small bowl to your neighbor.
Right, exactly. Now there is the reality of health issues, though.
Yeah, yes.
And so you can say, it's easy to say, well, we'll find a place that you're passionate about and go out and volunteer. Then a health issue sets in, and perhaps you can't drive anymore.
Right.
So what is the reality of health issues? How does that play into the other types of choices, or what other types of choices, alternatives can we seek to keep the interaction and prevent the loneliness if we aren't able to get out and about?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And then you have to rely on people coming to see you. Another part of our Western culture is we don't like to ask for help. And I see that over and over again, that resistance. I'm okay, leave me alone. Well, that's a mental attitude that has to change on the part of the older person to be able to accept help and be on the receiving end, maybe for the first time in your life. And I know about health issues. I've had some myself recently, and again, we spend a lot of time going to the doctor. I mean, if people are listening to this that are my age, they're going to start laughing because, my gosh, we've got eye appointments and heart appointments and, you know, whatever else is going on in our lives. It's just everywhere. But again, having a good support team, which includes your medical network of people that take care of you, is so important, but we don't want that to occupy our lives. And I joke about a table of older people, their conversation, 90% of it will be what's happening in their physical bodies.
Yeah.
They'll be talking about their hip replacements, their knee replacements. They'll be, you know, and it's okay, actually. It's something that we have in common. When we're younger, we talk about our kids and baseball games and all of that, so why not? But we don't want to always be focusing on our bodies and how they may be failing us. But in terms of getting isolated because of it, it's just an extra battle, you know. But part of that is having that attitude that I'm going to get better, and that I'll be able to do the things that I want to do. I worked for years in hospice. Okay, I worked with several different companies in hospice, and even the last 6 months of your life should be a good 6 months if you have a group of people that are around you that are supporting you, and that you get to really choose what you want to do then. Anything that you can do. You know, that's the attitude towards the end. Well, graduating up to that, as we run into I mean, our destiny is a shared destiny. We're all going to pass out of this world, but we can keep living till the end. The sad thing, I think Norman Cousins said, the sad thing isn't that people are dying, it's that they're not living while they're alive. So having that kind of attitude that I'll keep on choosing, I'll keep on loving my friends and family, I'll keep being open and embrace life, that's my job. I'm responsible to have that attitude, and each individual can choose that.
I like what you said too, though, about realizing that sometimes you need to ask for help.
Yeah.
So there are transportation services.
Right.
Maybe it might be more of a challenge in rural areas, but there are people who can provide transportation services. That perhaps is one of those things that they examine when they talk about. There are groups underway that are working together to form a plan for an aging-friendly state, if you will. I'm not sure that's exactly what they're calling it, but it's along those lines. Transportation is one of the issues they're taking a look at, because if an older adult says, well, I'd like to get involved in XYZ, I just don't have a way to get there. So how can they get there? How can we help bridge that gap so that they're able to do it?
You know, that gap will take care of itself in a few years. And the reason I say that is I have an 87-year-old sister. Adore her. She's just one of my mentors. But she doesn't know how to use Uber.
I resisted it.
Yeah.
Not too long ago.
She has an iPhone, and she's kind of used to that. And she has a Facebook page, and she enjoys that. But our technology, you know, I'll call an Uber, or I'll call and have my meal delivered to my home, because I know how to do that already. And so we have a generation gap here where an older generation has not learned or is not able or hasn't taken on the technology. Now some have, but many have not. And then those of us who are coming up behind are all savvy on this stuff. And so that's going to really solve some problems, even of isolation.
Can people be isolated and describe the difference? Because some people will say, well, gosh, there's social media, there are ways, like you're saying, there's technology giving you ways to reach out, but is that the same as, and maybe kids think, well, I'm talking to my parent on FaceTime or on the phone. Is that the same as the human interaction?
No, of course
face-to-face physical interaction. And why should we be careful of assuming that just because we see an older friend, neighbor, relative posting a lot on social media that means they're okay and engaged?
Yeah, absolutely, it's not the same. You're so right. But it's maybe a little substitute that gets us through the day. That's okay. Part of that is okay. But we still need human beings in our life. We need hugs. You know, we need somebody to hold hands with. Do you ever notice how many older people, women will hold hands while they're walking down the hallway or the street, and it's quite acceptable, you know, but it's because that human touch is important. And I saw a lot of that when I was working in a community that people do more touching. And it's sweet because they need that. Even widows, widowers, everyone needs that. So you're right. It will never take the place of human connection, but maybe it allows us to connect to someone. You know, there may be someone that lives just down the street that you might connect with via some kind of networking on social media. And maybe that's something we need more of in social media, is how to meet your neighbor. You know, we don't have front porches anymore. And front porches is how you met your neighbors. Right. Now we have patios, which are in the back of the house. We need front porches, but that'd be a great name for a website. Front porch. Let's get together on the porch.
Make a real connection. Don't make it always a virtual front porch, though. Somebody get a real front porch.
Let's get
and I do
together.
want to show your book is Wisdom for Healthy Aging. What is the biggest lesson that you've learned?
Well, I would have to say, off the top of my head, attitude. You've got to have a good one. It just makes a difference in your own life. So tackle it, take it on, plan for it. Don't put your head in the sand. That is, you know, we know the direction that we're going. I have fewer years to live than I've lived, by far. And so I know that, and I need to plan for my future. So attitude and planning for your future. Are you in the right place? Could you get in the right place? Getting rid of stuff. Oh my gosh, the amount of material goods. Some people get frozen I mentioned that 5-bedroom home. They get frozen there because they get too old to dispense of it. And so they just stay there, living in about 500 square feet of that house. But the house is full of stuff, the basement's full of stuff, the attic's full of stuff. We need to get rid of stuff while we can.
Don't lecture me, Connie.
Yes, I know. When I give this little presentation, which I do frequently, and if there are couples there, someone's always punching someone, or it breaks out in nervous giggles. as I talk about, well, how many sets of china do you have? You know, so, and I've taken my own medicine on that, and Pat and I have done that.
How many times have you actually eaten out of any
those
of those
dishes
that are there? I think I served one meal in our wedding china one time. Yeah.
Well, you know what? I got mine out finally a few years ago, and I use it every day now.
As long as you just like keep it sitting out, right?
Yeah.
But I have cats, I can't do that.
Oh, okay.
They knock them
well,
off of
it's in the cabinet, and we eat on them. You know, you have to make those decisions.
You're so worried about saving things.
Yeah.
Use them and enjoy them.
And you think your
while
kids
they're
want them? They do not. They go to IKEA and Target and buy their new set of dishes they're so excited about, and they're darling, and I love them too. But they don't want antiques. Now, somebody listening to this will say, "I love antiques." Well, it's very uncommon.
I do, and that's why I have all the dishes that I have in my house.
Yeah.
Well, but I like what you say about planning. And I think part of that, too, is the acceptance and the reality. So,
Right.
like you said, the reality that at some point we'll most likely retire from our job.
Right.
Plan how you're going to fill your hours. Accept the fact that, and this is something I've had to, my body doesn't feel the same way when I run that it used to. So I've kind of accepted that, it's not going to be running the speed I used to, and that's okay as long as I keep moving. As long as I could look at Marvin in Manhattan out there doing the Sunflower State Games when he's 90 plus, I'm like, that's what I want to be when I grow up.
Exactly.
I want to be like that, still moving. It doesn't matter how fast, just be moving.
Moving. And I prefer to call it moving over exercise. Just plan to move. And that'll get you a little further, because it doesn't sound like something you have to set time apart for. Just keep moving. And something you just mentioned, we all need mentors of older people. Even if we're not real close to them, you watch them and you say, I want to be like that.
Right.
Yeah. And that's what I was able to do for all the years that I worked in those communities. I would pick people out and I'd say, that's exactly how I want to be, to myself. Now, some of them I told them, I tried to hang out with them as much as possible. But then there are others you think, you've inspired me not to be the way you are.
Well, there's a lady I know. When I turned 50, I reached out to her because she was turning 60, and I said, well, let's just share what are your lessons learned? Because, 50 is supposed to be this big traumatic thing, and it's stressful only because I took a different position, right? And so that's what I'm like, I'm 50, I'm starting something new, I'm too old to change my ways. But that's kind of, she's 60 and living life and is so vibrant and so outgoing and is now studying for another degree, a higher educational degree. And I thought, okay, I'm not done yet.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the attitude. You're never done.
Right. Never. There's always something you can do. And if anyone says, I'm too old to do that, I just have to say, hold it. You're not too old. And now, if I say to someone, I'm going to run a marathon, it wouldn't be that I could not do that. I don't want to do that, and that's okay too.
The needs and the wants.
Yeah,
right? Like what
we
you were
can
saying.
choose what those goals are, and if it's something that it doesn't even excite you, well, we wouldn't take it on. But if it's something, no matter your age, if it's something that you could get excited about, I say go for it.
Your local community, who can get you connected with some of these things?
Yeah.
Is your local agency on aging? Who should you reach out to?
Well, it all depends on what it is that you want to do, but finding a group of people that will support your dream. I had a gentleman reach out to me via email that was looking for a job, and he wanted to work 20 hours a week, and he said, I'm really good at what I do, and he listed, it was like a resume. I was so impressed, and sort of at the end, he said, my only problem is people reject me because I'm 92. I thought, wow, what a great resume, but he was getting rejected because someone else thought he was too old at 92. So that reminds me of our whole political thing that's going on. So much judgment about older age. Some of it is valid, some of it is not valid. And I sort of have this different attitude about what it means to be a certain age, but it's more well, it's just a hot topic right
Yes.
now, but something
Look
for
beyond
all,
the number and,
yeah,
and figure out what's
the
going
person,
on.
yeah,
beyond that.
yeah, because we're all individuals. That's for sure.
We are.
Yeah.
Well, I love hearing from you and your attitude and the choices that we all can make to be more positive, and reach out to your older friends and neighbors, say hello,
Please
just
do.
smile to
Yeah.
them. Have these conversations perhaps with your own parents if they're nearing retirement, and how you think they will be able to stay involved in the life changes that they have experienced. Maybe they lost a spouse. Make sure they're staying connected, whether it be with you or with someone that you know has been a friend through the years. In fact, it can be time to build and regain some of those connections from years past. Connie, thank you so very much. And it's so important that everybody knows, no matter your age or where you are in life, we hear you and we see you. You can go to WIBW.com/hearmesee me. Some of these aging resources are right there on that list as well. Thanks for joining us.